Welcome back. I'm Roy with Rugged Badger Racing and Team Parts Badger. Behind me are ChampCar endurance race cars. We're at NCM, which is National Corvette Museum, for the National Championship in ChampCar, and we got a ton of tires we've been testing. Also with me is Tom from Falken. Now, I've mentioned before that Falken's been really supporting motorsports, and I've been able to bend his ear quite a bit with a lot of tips and tricks on tires. So Tom, do you mind walking me through some of the things that you shared with me about these tires and I guess how to get the best performance in a motorsports application?
Absolutely, I'll be happy to do that.
Let's dive in. All right, now one thing I noticed, you have these little sheets here that we've been going through. So walk me through this sheet, what's on here, and why is this important?
Sure. The small one is actually a little version or more compact version of the more formal sheet that we have. And basically, this is used to collect your basic tire data if you're kind of doing testing. So what you want to check, of course, is your tread temperatures, inside, middle, outside, in each of the 4 positions. You want to check what your hot pressures are, just so you can keep track of the changes that you're making and seeing how that's impacting the tire and the car performance.
Okay, now let's dive in. Now tell me what these numbers mean, and we'll hop over here to the tires and you can kind of walk me through that. But walk me through like how you read the tire, because you've been checking these things, you've been checking pressures, temperatures throughout the day, and I gotta say, these things look phenomenal. And for everybody watching this, we're at NCM, and NCM is the worst track in the nation. Try to think of a worse track in the nation on tires than NCM, and NCM is probably twice as much wear, and it's a hot day too. It's been in the 70s, and these tires held up really well. So what are you seeing when you look at these tires?
Well, let me use the tire that was kind of the most severe position, which was the left front, as kind of an example of what we look at and kind of what we're studying as we run the tire. I guess one of the most important things is I think pretty much everybody does check like hot pressures. They kind of have an idea of what the target hot pressure is. So that's always a good idea. Probably not everybody has pyrometers, but if you have a pyrometer, and especially a probe type that you really kind of stick into the rubber, not like one of those infrared guns that just read the surface temperature, that's going to give you the most consistent reading in terms of what's actually going on in terms of the temperature across the tread. And then the other point is, again, knowing what kind of stagger you want in your temperatures, as far as usually you're going to have about a 10 degree difference from the inside to the middle and another 10 degree difference to the outside shoulder.
So you want the inside to be hotter?
That's typically what you'll see with the proper setup. A lot of times people may be thinking that you want even temperatures across the tread, and that's probably almost impossible to get readings like that. This is not how it works, because obviously you've got different configurations and you're coming off the track after a different combination of corners, depending on which track you're at. But usually an indication that you've got enough negative camber dialed in with your alignment. And we're talking about competition cars, not really street cars, which are usually camber limited. But yeah, you usually see that gradient where you see higher temperatures on the inside, cooler temperatures on the outside, because that usually indicates you have the proper amount of negative camber dialed in for your setup.
Okay, so tell me about pressure then. So you talk about inside to outside, negative camber. So if the outside is too hot, you need more camber, right?
That's correct, more negative camber.
Okay, and then how do I know about pressures? Like how would I tell with the temperature gradient?
So typically you want to look at your deltas when you're looking at your pressures. So always you want to record what your starting, your cold pressure is. And then you start checking what your hot pressures is as you're going through your test day or checking up your setup. Usually you're going to see a pressure delta between cold and hot of maybe at least 5 to 6 psi. That kind of gives you an idea that the tire is working well. And that's also in combination with, if you're able to take those tread temperatures, you kind of combine those 2 pieces of data to make sure you're kind of hitting the sweet spot of the tire. But the delta between cold and hot can be as much as 10 psi difference if you've got a lightweight car, if you've got kind of larger tires on that vehicle. You can run lower pressures, so you may have a bigger delta, and that can also vary by track, which track you're running on how big that difference between your cold and hot pressures are.
Okay, so let's say we're measuring this tire and we have outside middle, inside, and let's say the middle is hotter than it should be. What is that telling us?
Right. Typically, that means that you got too much inflation pressure. So basically, the contact patch, the middle of the tire is kind of sticking up or crowning too much. So you need to lower your pressures to get that middle temperature down a little bit. So you get that more of a natural gradient of high temperature, and then a little bit lower, and then a little bit lower as you go from inside to the outside of the sidewall.
Okay, awesome. So Tom, one thing we're expecting this weekend is a lot of rain.
Yep,
unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately, right? And we have a lot of tires here, and your recommendation was, hey, get a scrub in on these tires. So why do you want to scrub in these tires before driving in the rain?
Yeah, you just want to get a little texturing on them. I mean, all tires, they come out of a mold, so they typically have a release agent. And so it just takes a little bit of scuffing to make sure you don't have any of that on your tire. It's even worse if you've got fresh tires that you want to run right away in the wet. You want to make sure you don't have any of that. So again, just a light scuff of the surface to kind of prep that set of tires for wet conditions. Okay,
so the tires we have over here, so I think we're driving these at about maybe 70% out there. We got about 4 laps. So what do you think about these? Is this a good scuff that you'd like to see?
That's all you need. You just want to take that surface off. Yep. And then you don't want to run them too hard because, again, fresher tires do give you better performance. So you want to keep that fresh shoulder so it's ready to go. You just want to scuff in that surface.
All right, there you have it. So if you're going to race in the rain, make sure you run scuff tires. All right, so Tom, we were talking a little bit earlier about shoulder design and how some tires have a more rounded edge and a more square edge.
Right.
Walk me through why tire manufacturers do that and what the difference would be as a driver on the track.
Sure. So I guess we can use this worn RT660 Plus as an example. And this is the inside shoulder, which is kind of almost brand new. And you can see it's a fairly square, wide shoulder profile here. And this is going to give you a better feeling in terms of turn-in and response, at least when the tire is more fresh, as opposed to some designs, and this is the shoulder that's heavily worn, but some manufacturers prefer a more rounder shoulder design when it's new. And the advantage of this type of design is you just have maybe not as crisp of a feel in turn-in, but it's more forgiving when you do go over the limit. So that's kind of the compromise. You can have kind of a better feel tire in terms of turn-in and response, but maybe a little bit trickier to catch once you go over the limit, as opposed to a rounder shoulder that may not feel quite as crisp, but maybe is a little bit easier to manage when you do go over the limit and you're kind of counter steering and correcting. So again, each manufacturer kind of has their philosophy and idea of what they think is better for more consumers. So that's why you'll see those differences from the manufacturers and the approach that they take.
All right. All right, Tom. So one other tip that you told me on these tires was actually about marking the valve stem. So we have 2 examples here. Why don't you show me this trick and why we do it?
Sure. So what I always do anytime I'm running at the track is indexing, I guess, the position of valve stem. So let me show you one that did not move first. So all I do is I take some tire chalk or a paint marker, and you just make a line where the valve stem is. And what this does is it will show you whether the tire is slipping on the wheel at all. And that's this example here, where you can see originally this mark was over here at the valve stem, so you can see how much it moved. And this is nothing to be alarmed about. This is not uncommon, but just keep in mind, you know, you've got the tire manufacturers that have got their tolerances. You've got the wheel manufacturers that have their manufacturing tolerances. So sometimes you'll have tire and wheel combinations that slip more easily than others, but again, it's not something to be alarmed about, and this is actually very common.
Yeah, and something that we do, because we actually bought a tire machine. I don't know if you know this. So we have our own tire machine, and I saw when they're mounting the tires, we have like this giant thing of soapy water. Oh. So we're putting soap all over it, which is probably going to make this thing slippery, right?
And that's what it's supposed to do, because for sure you don't want to damage the bead when you're mounting up the tires. So that's not a problem, but you just want to give the tire and wheel assembly plenty of time to dry. Okay. But again, when you're talking about competition tires with the amount of grip they have, even if you didn't use soapy water, it would probably still slip just because you're talking about a really high grip compound. So again, not really something to be alarmed about, But if you do happen to notice, for example, a vibration that wasn't there before, and you index your tires and wheels, that may be the cause of the vibration that you're feeling, because now your assembly is out of balance because the tire spun on the wheel.
All right, that's a great tip. So mark your valve stems, and then if you feel like your tires are out of balance, that's probably why.
Correct.
All right. Now, Tom, something I noticed on these tires here, and I've noticed this with a lot of different brands too, with the center rib. And what happens is you end up with like this camber in the center rib.
Right.
Why does that occur? Is that something I should be concerned about? Is that normal?
Yeah, it is normal. Any time you have a tread design, especially a rib type design that's part of a tread pattern, and you get a lot of scrubbing, especially that side force scrubbing, the leading edge, the side that's taking that scrubbing first, is going to wear quicker. And that's why you see that angle. Here's the leading edge that's taking that force, and then here's the trailing edge, which is not taking as much of that force. So you will get that cambered wear. And unfortunately, anything that has a rib type design that you kind of push out on the track is going to have that type of wear develop. It's basically unavoidable. The only way to really avoid this is if you're running a slick, and then you're not going to have that problem.
Okay, fair enough. So when are you going to come out with slicks? 200 treadwear slicks, right? That's what's next?
They don't exist.
They don't exist?
Yeah.
All right, there you have it. So nothing to worry about with this central rib and then that camber.
Yep.